Chapter 1. The Sunset That Never Happened. Curtis Brown had always imagined life in snapshots. Little mental photographs he carried around like postcards from a future that never came. One of his favorites was the sunset scene. 2 rocking chairs on a porch, him and his wife old and gray, watching the sky bleed orange and pink while their grandkids played in the yard. That picture had been so vivid it felt inevitable. Now it was just a cruel joke. Curtis sat at the long oak dining table in his parents' house, the smell of roasted chicken and garlic mashed potatoes filling the air. His mother hummed softly in the kitchen, moving with the kind of grace that came from decades of practice. His father was in his recliner, half watching a football game and half listening to the conversation at the table. Scarlette, his older sister, perched across from him like a hawk, chin resting on her hand, eyes narrowed in judgment. "You look like someone stole your puppy," Scarlette said, stabbing a piece of broccoli with unnecessary force. "Actually, scratch that. You look like someone stole your puppy, ran over it, and then told you it was your fault." Curtis smirked, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Thanks for the pep talk, Scar. Really uplifting." "I'm serious." She leaned forward, her dark curls bouncing as she moved. "You've been moping for a year, Curtis. A whole year. You're 31, not 81. You've got time to live, but you're acting like your life ended when she left." Curtis's jaw tightened. He didn't like talking about his ex-wife, not because he hated her, he didn't, but because every conversation felt like peeling off a scab that hadn't healed right. "I'm not moping," he said evenly. "I'm recalibrating." Scarlette snorted. "Recalibrating? What are you, a robot?" "Sometimes I wish I was," Curtis muttered. "Would have saved me a lot of trouble." Scarlette rolled her eyes so hard Curtis thought she might sprain something. "You married young, you made a mistake, big deal. Welcome to the club. Half the people I know have a divorce under their belt." Curtis didn't respond. He focused on his plate, cutting his chicken into neat squares, pretending the conversation wasn't digging under his skin. He wasn't angry, he didn't do angry anymore. Anger was a cage, and he'd spent enough time locked inside it when his marriage fell apart. He'd learned that lesson the hard way. Anger doesn't fix anything. It just holds you hostage until you're ready to deal with the real problem. The real problem was trust. Not in other people, though that was shaky, but in himself. He'd thought he was a good judge of character. He'd thought he knew what love looked like. Turns out, he couldn't read a person if they handed him a manual. Scarlette wasn't done. "You know what Mom said the other day?" she continued, lowering her voice like she was about to share state secrets. "She said, I think Curtis needs someone to take him out and remind him he's still handsome." Curtis groaned. "Please tell me you didn't agree." "Oh, I agreed," Scarlette said with a wicked grin. "And then I told her I'd handle it." Curtis set down his fork slowly. "Scarlette, don't Scarlette me," she said, wagging her finger. "You've been single for over a year. You're not even trying. You go to work, you come home, you watch Netflix, you sleep. Rinse and repeat. That's not living, Curtis. That's existing." "Maybe I like existing," Curtis said dryly. "No, you don't." Scarlett's tone softened, and for a moment, Curtis saw the sister who used to patch up his scraped knees and threaten playground bullies. "You want a family. You've always wanted that. You're not going to get it sitting on your couch eating takeout." Curtis swallowed hard. She wasn't wrong. He did want a family. That was the whole reason he married young. He wanted to be the kind of dad who could keep up with his kids, not the guy wheezing on the sidelines. His parents had set the bar high. 33 years of marriage, still laughing at each other's jokes, still holding hands like teenagers. Curtis had wanted that so badly, he jumped at the first woman who smiled at him like he was her whole world. Turns out, he was just her layover on the way to Miami. Scarlette reached across the table and tapped his knuckles. "Let me help you," she said gently. "Please." Curtis looked up, meeting her eyes. They were the same shade of green as his, but hers sparkled with determination while his felt dull, like someone had turned down the brightness. "Help me how?" he asked warily. Scarlette grinned like a cat who'd just spotted a mouse. "Oh, you'll see." Later that night, Curtis drove home with the radio low, the hum of tires on asphalt filling the silence. Scarlett's words echoed in his head, bouncing around like stubborn marbles. "You want a family. You're not going to get it sitting on your couch." She was right. He hated that she was right. His apartment was neat, almost sterile. A leather couch, a flat-screen TV, a bookshelf lined with novels he hadn't touched in months. No photos on the walls, no signs of life beyond the basics. It looked like a place someone stayed, not lived. Curtis dropped his keys in the bowl by the door and sank onto the couch. He stared at the blank TV screen, his reflection faint in the glass. 31 years old, divorced, no kids, no dog, no sunset porch. Just him. He rubbed his face and let out a long breath. Maybe Scarlette was right. Maybe it was time to try again. But the thought of dating made his stomach twist. He'd been out of the game for almost 5 years. The game had changed. Hell, he didn't even know the rules anymore. And worse, he didn't trust himself to play. The next morning, Curtis woke to a text from Scarlette that made his blood run cold. "Scarlette, don't make plans tonight. Jenny and I are coming over. We're fixing you." Curtis stared at the screen, groaning. Jenny Thompson. Scarlett's best friend since high school. Smart, funny, gorgeous, and completely off limits. Curtis had a rule. Never sleep with your friend's sisters and never sleep with your sister's friends. Too many things could go wrong. Safer to avoid the problem than fix it when it breaks. He typed back a reply. Curtis, define fixing. Her response was instant. Scarlett, glow up time, baby brother. See you at 7. Curtis tossed his phone on the bed and muttered, God help me. That evening, Curtis opened the door to find Scarlett and Jenny standing there like a makeover sweat team. Scarlett held a garment bag. Jenny carried a box of hair products and what looked suspiciously like cologne. Curtis blinked. What is this? An ambush. Scarlett breezed past him. It's an intervention. Jenny smiled and Curtis felt his stomach do something weird, like a hiccup and a flip at the same time. She looked good. Too good. Her chestnut hair was pulled into a sleek ponytail, and her eyes sparkled with amusement. Hi, Curtis, she said warmly. Ready to become irresistible? Curtis groaned. I was hoping for presentable. Scarlett clapped her hands. Nope, we're going full glow up. You've been out of the game for 5 years. The game has changed. Curtis shut the door and leaned against it, resigned. I hate this already. Jenny laughed, and the sound was like sunlight breaking through clouds. Curtis told himself not to notice. Not to notice the way her smile made his chest feel lighter. Not to notice the way her voice curled around his name like it belonged there. He had rules. Rules kept things simple. Rules kept things safe. But as Scarlett dumped the garment bag on his couch and Jenny lined up bottles on the coffee table, Curtis had a sinking feeling that his rules were about to be tested. Chapter 2. The Makeover Ambush. Curtis had faced some intimidating things in his 31 years, job interviews, mortgage paperwork, even his ex-wife's lawyer, but nothing compared to the sight of Scarlett and Jenny standing in his living room like they owned the place. Scarlett had commandeered the couch, tossing a garment bag across the cushions with a flourish. Jenny was kneeling by the coffee table, lining up bottles of shampoo, conditioner, styling gel, and something that looked suspiciously like a face mask. Curtis eyed the array like it might explode. This looks like a crime scene, he said, shutting the door behind him. What's the charge? Being single? Scarlett grinned. Guilty as charged. Sentence, glow up. Curtis groaned, dragging a hand down his face. Scar, I agreed to dinner. I did not agree to whatever this is. Jenny looked up, her smile warm and teasing. It's not that bad. We're just updating you for the modern era. Curtis raised an eyebrow. Updating me? I'm not software. Scarlett snorted. You might as well be. You've been running on the same version since college. Curtis shot her a look. I'm fine the way I am. No, you're not, Scarlett said sweetly, which somehow made it worse. You're handsome, Curtis, but you're hiding it under whatever this is. She gestured vaguely at his jeans and faded t-shirt. You look like you gave up. Curtis glanced down at himself. This is comfortable. This is tragic, Scarlett countered. Jenny, back me up. Jenny hesitated, biting her lip like she was trying not to laugh. It's a little dated, she admitted, but nothing we can't fix. Curtis sighed and dropped onto the armchair like a man awaiting execution. Why do I feel like I'm about to lose all my dignity? Scarlett patted his knee. Because you are. Now let's talk strategy. Curtis stared at her. Strategy? Scarlett perched on the edge of the couch, eyes gleaming. Dating strategy. You've been out of the game for 5 years. The game has changed. Curtis leaned back, arms crossed. I don't even want to play the game. Scarlett ignored him. First rule, no more sad bachelor wardrobe. Second rule, confidence. Third rule, you're going to let Jenny and me set up a profile for you. Curtis sat up so fast the chair creaked. Absolutely not. Scarlett smirked. Absolutely yes. Jenny raised her hands in mock surrender. We'll keep it tasteful, she promised. No shirtless bathroom selfies. Curtis groaned. I hate this already. Scarlett clapped her hands. Too late. You're in. Now, Jenny, show him the options. Jenny pulled out her phone and opened an app, scrolling through pictures of men who looked like they belonged in cologne ads. Curtis squinted. Who are these guys? Examples, Jenny said. See? Clean haircut, good lighting, clothes that fit. Curtis frowned. They look like they spend more time on their hair than on their jobs. Scarlett snorted. Welcome to dating in 2025. Curtis rubbed his temples. This is a nightmare. Jenny's voice softened. It doesn't have to be. We're just helping you put your best foot forward. Curtis looked at her then, really looked. Her eyes were warm, her smile easy, and for a second, the tension in his chest loosened. He told himself not to notice. Not to notice the way her ponytail swung when she moved, or the way her laugh made the room feel brighter. He had rules. Rules kept things simple. Rules kept things safe. Scarlett broke the moment with a clap. Okay, first step, haircut. Curtis, when was the last time you saw a barber? Curtis hesitated. Before the divorce. Scarlett groaned. Jenny, get your keys. We're going. Curtis blinked. Wait now. Now. Scarlette said firmly, before you talk yourself out of it. The salon smelled like citrus and hairspray, and Curtis felt like a fish out of water. Scarlette chatted with the stylist like they were old friends, while Jenny hovered nearby, offering suggestions that made Curtis's stomach flip. Not too short, Jenny said, studying his face. He has a good jawline. We should show that off. Curtis tried not to react, but his ears burned. Good jawline? He hadn't thought about his jawline since high school. The stylist snipped away years of neglect, and when Curtis finally looked in the mirror, he barely recognized himself. His hair was shorter, cleaner, styled in a way that looked effortless but probably wasn't. Scarlette whistled. Look at you, 10 years younger. Jenny smiled, and Curtis felt that weird hiccup flip in his chest again. It suits you, she said softly. Curtis cleared his throat. Great. Can we go now? Scarlette grinned. Not yet. Next stop, wardrobe. 2 hours later, Curtis stood in a fitting room surrounded by shirts that actually had structure and jeans that didn't sag like deflated balloons. Scarlette shoved a navy button down at him. Try this. Curtis groaned. Scar, I'm not going to a wedding. It's casual, Scarlette said. Just better than what you own. Jenny peeked around the curtain, her eyes sparkling. You'll look good in that color. Curtis muttered something under his breath and changed. When he stepped out, Scarlette clapped like a proud parent. Jenny just smiled, slow, warm, and approving. Curtis felt his pulse trip over itself. Scarlette snapped a photo before he could protest. Perfect. This is going on your profile. Curtis froze. Scarlette? Too late, she sang, typing furiously. Jenny laughed, and Curtis turned to her, desperate. You're supposed to be the reasonable one. Jenny shrugged, still smiling. I think you look great. Curtis stared at her for a beat too long before looking away. God help me. Back at his apartment, Curtis collapsed on the couch while Scarlette uploaded photos and Jenny adjusted his bio. He watched them bicker over adjectives like adventurous and laid back, wondering how his life had spiraled into this. Scarlette read aloud. Family-oriented. Loves good conversation. Enjoys cooking. Curtis frowned. I don't enjoy cooking. Scarlette waved a hand. You will. Jenny chuckled. Maybe leave that out. Scarlette huffed. Fine. Family-oriented. Loves good conversation. Happy. Curtis muttered. Thrilled. Jenny glanced at him, her expression soft. You okay? Curtis met her eyes, and for a moment, the noise faded. I don't know, he admitted quietly. I feel like I'm pretending. Jenny's voice was gentle. You're not pretending. You're just starting over. Curtis swallowed hard. Starting over feels like lying. Jenny shook her head. No, it's hope. Curtis stared at her, something shifting inside him. He told himself to look away, but he didn't. Scarlette broke the silence with a triumphant cheer. Done. Curtis Brown is officially back in the game. Curtis groaned. God help the game. Jenny laughed, and Curtis thought, God help me. Chapter 3. The first disaster date. Curtis stared at his phone like it was a ticking bomb. The dating app Scarlette and Jenny had installed was glowing on the screen, mocking him with cheerful notifications. You have 3 new matches. He hadn't even opened the app since they set it up last night. He'd gone to bed hoping the universe would intervene. Maybe the app would crash. Maybe his phone would spontaneously combust. No such luck. Scarlett's text came in at 9:02 a.m., sharp as a dagger. Scarlette, don't chicken out. Tonight, 7 p.m. Her name's Kelsey. Be nice. Curtis groaned. He typed back, Curtis, define nice. Her reply was instant. Scarlette, don't talk about your ex, don't talk about your rule. Don't talk about how dating apps are the downfall of civilization. Smile. Compliment her hair. Order dessert. Got it? Curtis stared at the screen. Order dessert? Was that a rule now? He shoved the phone in his pocket and muttered, God help me. By 7 o'clock, Curtis was sitting in a trendy downtown restaurant that smelled like rosemary and ambition. The lighting was dim, the music soft, and the tables spaced just far enough apart to make eavesdropping a sport. Curtis tugged at the collar of his new navy button-down, the one Scarlette had bullied him into buying, and tried not to sweat through it. Kelsey arrived 5 minutes late, breezing in with a cloud of perfume and a smile that looked rehearsed. She was tall, blonde, and dressed like she'd stepped out of a fashion blog. Curtis stood, offered a polite smile, and prayed he wouldn't say anything stupid. Curtis? She asked, her voice bright. That's me, he said, pulling out her chair. Nice to meet you. She sat, crossing her legs with the grace of someone who'd practiced in front of a mirror. This place is cute, she said, glancing around. Very Instagram-worthy. Curtis blinked. Instagram-worthy. Kelsey laughed lightly. You know, good lighting, aesthetic vibes. Perfect for a story post. Curtis nodded slowly, as if that made sense. Right? Aesthetic vibes. The waiter appeared, and Curtis ordered a steak while Kelsey requested a salad with extra dressing, but on the side. Curtis tried to make conversation, but every topic felt like walking through a minefield. So, he said, what do you do? I'm a lifestyle influencer, Kelsey said proudly. Curtis hesitated. Influencer. She smiled like he'd asked her to explain gravity. I create content. Fashion, wellness, travel tips. I have 50,000 followers. Curtis nodded, unsure if that was impressive or terrifying. That's a lot of people. It's a community, Kelsey corrected. I help people live their best lives. Curtis bit back a comment about how his best life didn't involve hashtags. Sounds rewarding. Kelsey launched into a monologue about brand partnerships and engagement metrics, and Curtis nodded at appropriate intervals, his mind drifting. He thought about Scarlett's rules. Smile. Compliment her hair. Order dessert. He could do that. Probably. When the waiter returned with their meals, Curtis tried to salvage the evening. Your hair looks nice, he said, aiming for casual. Kelsey beamed. Thanks. It's a balayage. Took 3 hours. Curtis had no idea what that meant, but he smiled anyway. Worth it. She laughed, and for a moment, Curtis felt like maybe he wasn't completely failing. Then her phone buzzed, and she snatched it up like it was oxygen. Sorry, she said, tapping furiously. Just posting a quick story. Curtis watched as she angled her salad toward the candlelight, snapping photos from 3 different positions. He stared at his steak, wondering if he should pose it too. Across town, Scarlette and Jenny were sitting in a booth at a diner, Scarlette's phone on the table like a surveillance device. Any updates? Jenny asked, sipping her iced tea. Scarlette grinned. He texted me 5 minutes ago. Kill me. Jenny laughed, shaking her head. Poor guy. Scarlette smirked. He'll survive. It's good for him. Jenny hesitated, twirling her straw. You think he's ready for this? Scarlette shrugged. He needs a push. He's been stuck in neutral for a year. Jenny nodded, but her stomach felt weird, tight, fluttery. She told herself it was sympathy, nothing more. Curtis was Scarlett's brother. Off limits. End of story. Scarlett's phone buzzed again. She glanced at it and snorted. He says, she's taking pictures of her salad. Jenny laughed so hard she nearly spilled her tea. Oh no. Scarlette grinned. This is gold. Back at the restaurant, Curtis was trying to remember how to breathe. Kelsey had finished photographing her salad and was now explaining the benefits of celery juice in excruciating detail. It detoxes your liver, she said earnestly. You should try it. Curtis nodded. I'll keep that in mind. When the waiter returned with the dessert menu, Curtis seized the opportunity like a drowning man grabbing a life preserver. Dessert? He asked, forcing enthusiasm. Kelsey wrinkled her nose. Oh no. Sugar is poison. Curtis stared at her. Poison? Absolutely, she said. I haven't had dessert in 3 years. Curtis closed the menu slowly. 3 years. Kelsey smiled. You get used to it. Curtis thought about Scarlett's rule, order dessert, and wondered if ordering a slice of cake would count as rebellion or self-care. He ordered coffee instead. By the time the check arrived, Curtis felt like he'd run a marathon in dress shoes. He walked Kelsey to her car, thanked her politely, and promised to keep in touch, which was code for never speak again. At home, Curtis collapsed on the couch and texted Scarlette. Curtis, if this is the game, I'm retiring. Her reply was instant. Scarlette, one bad date doesn't mean you quit. Tomorrow we regroup. Curtis tossed his phone aside and muttered, God help me. Jenny's phone buzzed later that night. It was Scarlette, sending a play-by-play of Curtis's misery. Jenny laughed, but the sound felt hollow. She pictured Curtis sitting alone in his apartment, looking defeated, and her chest tightened. She told herself it was just concern, just friendship. But deep down, she knew it was something else. Chapter 4. The Pact. Jenny Thompson was not easily rattled. She'd handled corporate crises, family drama, and Scarlett's occasional brilliant ideas that usually ended in chaos. But tonight, sitting across from Scarlette in their favorite diner, Jenny felt unsettled. Scarlette was scrolling through her phone like a general reviewing battle plans. Okay, she said, grinning. Curtis survived the influencer. Barely. Jenny laughed, stirring her iced tea. Poor guy. He sounded miserable. Scarlette smirked. He was. But that's good. Builds character. Jenny raised an eyebrow. Scar, this isn't boot camp. It's dating. Scarlette waved a hand. Same difference. He needs to toughen up. Jenny smiled, but her chest felt tight. She pictured Curtis at that restaurant, tugging at his collar, trying to make conversation while someone lectured him about celery juice. He deserved better. He deserved someone who saw him. Not his wardrobe, not his profile, just him. Scarlett's voice broke through her thoughts. So, next step, regroup. We'll give him a pep talk. Maybe line up another date. Jenny hesitated, her fingers tightening around her glass. Scar, are you sure this is what he wants? Scarlette frowned. Of course it is. He wants a family. He's just scared. Jenny nodded slowly. Yeah, scared. Scarlette leaned back, studying her. Why do you sound like you're questioning me? Jenny forced a smile. I'm not. Just wondering if maybe he needs time. Scarlette snorted. He's had time. A year of sulking is plenty. Jenny laughed softly, but the sound felt hollow. She didn't know how to explain the knot in her stomach, the way it tightened every time Curtis's name came up. She told herself it was concern, friendship, nothing more. But deep down, she knew that was a lie. Curtis was nursing a beer at home when Scarlett's text came in like a marching order. Scarlette, tomorrow, dinner at my place. Jenny's coming. We're regrouping. Curtis stared at the screen, groaning. He typed back, Curtis, Scar, I appreciate the effort, but I'm not sure this is working. Her reply was instant. Scarlette, one bad date doesn't mean you quit. Trust the process. Curtis tossed his phone aside and muttered, trust the process. Sure. What could go wrong? The next evening, Curtis walked into Scarlett's kitchen to find her chopping vegetables like she was auditioning for a cooking show. Jenny was setting the table, her ponytail swinging as she moved. Curtis felt that weird hiccup flip in his chest again and told himself to ignore it. Hey, Jenny said, smiling. You survived. Curtis chuckled. Barely. Scarlett grinned. Sit. We need a full debrief. Curtis sank into a chair, resigned. What's there to debrief? She hated sugar. I love sugar. End of story. Scarlett laughed. Details, Curtis. We need details. Curtis sighed. Fine. She spent half the night taking pictures of her salad. Told me sugar is poison. Suggested celery juice as a lifestyle. Jenny bit her lip, trying not to laugh. Sounds intense. Curtis smirked. That's one word for it. Scarlett waved a hand. Okay, so she's not the one. Big deal. That's why we keep trying. Curtis rubbed his temples. Scar. I'm not sure I'm cut out for this. Scarlett planted her hands on her hips. You are. You just need to stop overthinking. Curtis looked at her, frustration simmering. It's not overthinking. It's reality. I don't trust myself to make a good choice. I thought I knew what love looked like, and I was dead wrong. Jenny's heart squeezed at the raw honesty in his voice. She wanted to reach across the table, to tell him he wasn't broken, that he was more than his mistakes. Instead, she stayed quiet, her fingers curling around a napkin. Scarlett softened, her tone gentler. Curtis, you're not the same guy you were 5 years ago. You've learned. You've grown. Curtis shook his head. Maybe, but what if I pick wrong again? What if I waste another 3 years on someone who sees me as a pit stop? Jenny spoke before she could stop herself. Then you try again. Curtis looked at her, surprised. Jenny met his gaze, her voice steady even as her pulse raced. You don't give up on something you want just because it's hard. You want a family. You want love. That's worth the risk. Curtis stared at her, something shifting in his eyes, something that made Jenny's breath catch. She looked away quickly, pretending to adjust the silverware. Scarlett clapped her hands, breaking the tension. Exactly. So here's the plan. We keep helping you until you find someone who gets you. Curtis groaned. Scarlett? No arguments, she said firmly. You're in. Curtis sighed, defeated. Fine. But if the next date involves celery juice, I'm out. Jenny laughed, and Curtis thought, God help me if she keeps laughing like that. Later, after dinner, Scarlett cornered Jenny in the hallway while Curtis loaded the dishwasher. Spill, Scarlett whispered, eyes gleaming. You like him. Jenny froze. What? No. He's your brother. Scarlett smirked. That's not a denial. Jenny swallowed hard. Scar, I didn't plan this. He's kind. And funny. And... Scarlett hugged her before she could finish. Jenny, you're my best friend. I want the best for you. My brother is the best. It's simple. Jenny blinked. You're okay with this? Scarlett grinned. Are you kidding? I'd rather he end up with someone I trust than some random celery juice influencer. Jenny laughed, relief flooding her chest. I just didn't want to hurt our friendship. Scarlett squeezed her hands. You won't. In fact, new plan. We make him fall for you. Jenny's stomach flipped. Scarlett. Scarlett winked. Relax. He already likes you. I can tell. Jenny's heart thudded so hard she thought Scarlett might hear it. You think. Scarlett grinned. I know. Jenny walked out of the hallway feeling like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. She'd come here to help Curtis find someone else. Now, she wasn't sure if she wanted him to. Curtis drove home that night with Scarlett's words echoing in his head. You've grown. You've learned. Maybe she was right. Maybe he wasn't the same guy who jumped into marriage without looking. But as he pulled into his driveway, another thought pushed its way in. A thought he'd been trying to ignore. Jenny. Her laugh. Her smile. The way she looked at him tonight, like she saw past the mess and the mistakes. Curtis gripped the steering wheel, his chest tight. He couldn't go there. Not with her. Not with Scarlett's best friend. He had rules. Rules kept things simple. Rules kept things safe. But for the first time in a long time, Curtis wondered if safe was what he really wanted. Chapter 5. Curtis's confession. Curtis had never liked being the center of attention. He was the guy who blended into the background at parties, the one who fetched drinks and laughed at other people's jokes. But tonight, sitting across from Scarlett and Jenny at his own kitchen table, he felt like a bug under a microscope. Scarlett had her elbows planted on the table, chin resting on her hands, eyes sharp with determination. Jenny sat beside her, softer, quieter, but no less focused. Between them was a notepad, a pen, and Curtis's dignity, currently in shreds. "Okay," Scarlett said, tapping the pen like a judge calling court to order. "We've tried the makeover. We've tried the apps. We've tried the casual setups. None of it's working." Curtis leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Maybe that's because I told you I didn't want to do any of this." Scarlett ignored him. "So we're going back to basics. What do you want?" Curtis blinked. "What do I want?" "Yes," Scarlett said, like it was obvious. "In a woman. In a relationship. Spell it out." Curtis stared at her, then at Jenny, who offered a small, encouraging smile. He felt his stomach twist. He didn't like this, being asked to dig into feelings he'd buried under layers of sarcasm and avoidance. But Scarlett wasn't going to let him off the hook. He rubbed the back of his neck. "I don't know." Scarlett rolled her eyes. "You know. You just don't want to say it." Curtis exhaled slowly, staring at the wood grain of the table. "Fine," he said at last. "I want someone who wants me." Scarlett frowned. "That's vague." Curtis lifted his gaze, meeting hers head-on. "Not what I can do for her. Not what I can buy her. Just me." Scarlett blinked. Jenny's pen stilled on the paper. Curtis kept going, the words tumbling out now, raw and unfiltered. "I don't want to feel like I'm in a competition, like I have to prove my love every second just to keep her interested. If I have to buy a woman's love, it's not love, it's prostitution." The silence that followed was deafening. Scarlett's mouth fell open. Jenny's eyes widened, then softened with something Curtis couldn't name. Finally, Scarlett burst out laughing. "Oh my God, Curtis, you can't say that." Curtis shrugged. "Why not? It's true." Jenny's lips curved into a smile, though her voice was gentle. "That's blunt." Curtis met her gaze, his own steady. "I've learned enough lessons to know what I don't want." Scarlett wiped tears of laughter from her eyes. "You're going to scare people off with that speech." "Good," Curtis said. "Better to scare off the wrong ones than waste time." Jenny tilted her head, studying him like she was seeing him for the first time. "So, you want someone genuine?" Curtis nodded. "Someone who likes me for me, not for what I can give." Jenny's smile lingered, soft and thoughtful. "That's not unreasonable." Scarlett snorted. "It's going to make my job harder." Curtis smirked. "Maybe that's the point." Scarlett threw up her hands. "Fine, we'll work with it, but you're going to have to meet us halfway." Curtis raised an eyebrow. "How?" Scarlett grinned. "By not sabotaging every date we set up." Curtis groaned. "Scarlett?" "Nope," she said, cutting him off. "You're in this now, and honestly, that speech, it's going in your profile." Curtis stared at her. "You wouldn't." Scarlett grinned wider. "Watch me." Jenny laughed, and Curtis turned to her, desperate. "You're supposed to be the reasonable one." Jenny shrugged, her eyes warm. "I think it's honest." Curtis blinked. "Honest doesn't sell." Jenny held his gaze. "Maybe it should." Something in her tone made Curtis's chest tighten. He looked away, pretending to study the notepad, but the truth was he was thinking about her, about the way she listened without judgment, about the way her smile felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. He told himself to stop. He had rules. Rules kept things simple. Rules kept things safe. But as Scarlett launched into a lecture about marketable honesty, and Jenny quietly wrote down his words, Curtis had a sinking feeling that his rules were starting to crack. Later, after Scarlett left with promises of new strategies, Curtis found himself alone with Jenny. She lingered by the counter, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, her expression thoughtful. "That was brave," she said softly. Curtis leaned against the table, arms crossed. "Brave or stupid?" Jenny smiled. "Both." Curtis chuckled, the sound low. "Story of my life." Jenny hesitated, then stepped closer. "You really believe that? About love?" Curtis met her eyes. "I have to. Otherwise, what's the point?" Jenny nodded slowly, her gaze steady. "You deserve that." Curtis swallowed hard. "Do I?" "Yes," Jenny said simply. "You do." For a moment, the air between them felt charged, like a wire humming with electricity. Curtis wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in his throat. He told himself to look away, to break the tension, but he didn't. Jenny smiled, soft and warm, then turned toward the door. "Good night, Curtis." Curtis watched her leave, his chest tight, his mind a mess of rules and feelings he didn't want to name. When the door clicked shut, he let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Chapter 6. Blow up and growing tension. Curtis Brown had never spent this much time in a mall since high school, and even then, it was only because Scarlett worked at the pretzel stand and gave him free samples. Now, he was standing in front of a mirror in a men's boutique, wearing a shirt that actually had structure and jeans that didn't sag like they'd given up on life. Scarlett circled him like a drill sergeant inspecting a new recruit. "Turn around." Curtis sighed and obeyed. "Scar, I feel ridiculous." "You look amazing," Scarlett said, tugging at the sleeve. "Jenny, back me up." Jenny was leaning against a rack of jackets, her arms crossed, her smile soft but amused. "You do look good," she said. "Better than the faded t-shirts." Curtis frowned at his reflection. "I liked those t-shirts." Scarlette snorted. Those t-shirts were a cry for help. Curtis muttered. They were comfortable. Jenny stepped closer, her eyes warm. Comfortable doesn't have to mean sloppy. Curtis met her gaze, and for a second, the noise of the store faded. There was something in her tone, gentle, encouraging, that made his chest tighten. He looked away quickly, pretending to study the price tag. Scarlette clapped her hands. "Okay, we're buying this. And those shoes. And maybe a jacket." Curtis groaned. "Scarlette? Nope," she said, cutting him off. "You're in this now." The next few weeks were a blur of small changes. Curtis got a haircut that didn't look like he'd wandered out of a time capsule. He bought clothes that fit, shoes that didn't squeak, and even learned how to use hair product without feeling like he'd dipped his head in glue. Scarlette documented everything like a proud parent, sending Jenny photos with captions like, "Look at my baby brother thriving." Jenny always replied with a laughing emoji, but sometimes she added something else, a compliment that made Curtis's stomach flip. "He looks good. That color suits him. Tell him the haircut is perfect." Curtis told himself not to read into it. Jenny was Scarlette's best friend. Off limits. He had rules. Rules kept things simple. Rules kept things safe. But every time Jenny laughed at one of his sarcastic comments, every time her hand brushed his arm when they walked side by side, Curtis felt those rules cracking like thin ice. One Saturday afternoon, Scarlette dragged Curtis to a coffee shop for what she called Phase 2. Jenny was already there, sitting at a corner table with her laptop open. She looked up when they walked in, her smile lighting up the room. Curtis felt that hiccup flip in his chest again. He hated it. He loved it. He hated that he loved it. Scarlette plopped down across from Jenny. "Okay, team. We've got the look. Now we need the vibe." Curtis raised an eyebrow. "The vibe?" "Yes," Scarlette said, like it was obvious. "You can't just look good. You have to act like you know you look good." Curtis groaned. "Scarlette, I'm not a peacock." Jenny laughed softly. "Confidence isn't arrogance," she said. "It's being comfortable in your own skin." Curtis met her eyes. "That's easy for you to say." Jenny tilted her head. "You think I'm confident? Aren't you?" Curtis asked. Jenny smiled, a little shy. "Not always." Scarlette waved a hand. "Okay, enough therapy. Curtis, we're making a list of things you like, hobbies, interests, stuff that makes you sound like a human being." Curtis muttered, "I am a human being." Scarlette grinned. "Then prove it." They spent an hour brainstorming while Curtis tried not to notice how Jenny's laugh curled around the edges of his thoughts like sunlight. She asked questions, real questions, not the surface-level stuff people usually asked on dates. What made him happy? What scared him? What did he want his life to look like in 5 years? Curtis answered honestly, because for some reason, lying to Jenny felt impossible. "I want a family," he said quietly. "Kids. A home that feels solid." Jenny's eyes softened. "That's a good dream." Scarlette scribbled notes like a mad scientist. "Perfect. We'll use this for your profile." Curtis groaned. "Scarlette? Too late," she sang, typing furiously. Jenny laughed, and Curtis turned to her, desperate. "You're supposed to be the reasonable one." Jenny shrugged, her smile warm. "I think it's sweet." Curtis stared at her for a beat too long before looking away. His chest felt tight, his mind a mess of rules and feelings he didn't want to name. Over the next few weeks, Curtis went on a handful of dates, none of them memorable, all of them mildly disastrous. One woman spent 20 minutes explaining her crystal collection. Another asked if he'd be willing to invest in her brand. Curtis smiled politely, paid the check, and went home wondering if he was broken or if dating really was this absurd. Through it all, Jenny was there, helping, encouraging, laughing at his stories. Sometimes, when Scarlette wasn't around, they lingered in conversation a little longer. Curtis found himself looking forward to those moments more than he wanted to admit. One night, after a particularly awkward dinner with a woman who insisted on calling him C-bro, Curtis texted Jenny instead of Scarlette. "Curtis, please tell me dating wasn't this weird 5 years ago." Her reply came fast. "Jenny, it was. You just didn't notice because you were in love." Curtis stared at the screen, his chest tightening. He typed back before he could stop himself. "Curtis, not sure I'd call it love now." There was a pause, then Jenny. "Then maybe this time you'll find the real thing." Curtis didn't know what to say to that, so he didn't say anything. He just sat there, staring at her words, feeling something shift inside him like a door unlocking. The glow-up was working. Curtis looked better, felt better, even laughed more. But the real change wasn't in his haircut or his clothes. It was in the way Jenny's smile made him want to break every rule he'd ever made. And that terrified him. Chapter 7, The Rule. Curtis Brown had rules. Not many, he wasn't obsessive, but the few he had were carved in stone. They were simple, practical, designed to keep life from turning into a soap opera. Rule number 1. Never sleep with your friend's sisters. Rule number 2. Never sleep with your sister's friends. Too many things could go wrong. Friendships could implode. Family dinners could turn into hostage negotiations, and holidays? Forget about it. Curtis had seen enough drama to know that some lines weren't meant to be crossed. And yet, here he was, sitting on his couch, staring at his phone like it held the secrets of the universe, wondering if rules were meant to be broken. Jenny's name glowed on the screen from their last text exchange. Then maybe this time you'll find the real thing. He'd read it a dozen times, maybe more. Every time it hit him like a punch and a hug at the same time. Curtis tossed the phone aside and scrubbed his hands over his face. Get it together, he muttered. She's Scarlette's best friend. Off limits. But the truth was, Jenny wasn't just Scarlette's best friend anymore. She was Jenny, the woman who laughed at his sarcastic jokes, who listened like she actually cared, who made him feel like maybe he wasn't broken after all. Curtis leaned back, staring at the ceiling. He thought about the rule, why he made it in the first place. It wasn't just paranoia. It was experience. Flashback. 7 years ago, Curtis was 24, fresh out of college, working his first real job, and feeling like he had the world by the tail. His best friend at the time, Ryan, had a younger sister named Emily. Smart, funny, gorgeous. Curtis told himself he wasn't interested. He told himself it was a bad idea. Then one night, after too many beers and a game of pool that lasted until 2 a.m., Curtis kissed her. It was electric. It was stupid. It was the beginning of a disaster. Ryan found out 2 days later. The fallout was nuclear. Words were said. Ugly words Curtis still remembered. Ryan accused him of betrayal. Emily cried. Curtis tried to fix it, but the damage was done. The friendship never recovered. Curtis swore then and there. Never again. Never blur those lines. Never risk something that mattered for something that might not last. Back in the present, Curtis sat up, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. The rule had kept him safe for years, but now, felt like a cage. Because Jenny wasn't Emily. Jenny wasn't a reckless decision made in the haze of beer and bad judgment. Jenny was different. She was steady, kind, and somehow managed to make him laugh even when he felt like the world was gray. Curtis groaned and flopped back against the couch. Why does this feel like high school? He muttered. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and froze. Jenny, Scarlette says we're doing dinner Friday. You in? Curtis stared at the message, his pulse tripping over itself. Dinner. With Scarlette. And Jenny. He typed back before he could overthink it. Curtis, yeah, I'm in. Friday came too fast. Curtis spent an embarrassing amount of time picking out a shirt, navy button-down, the one Jenny said suited him. He told himself it was coincidence. He told himself he wasn't trying to impress her. He was lying. Scarlette had chosen a trendy little restaurant downtown, all exposed brick and Edison bulbs. Curtis arrived early because he hated being late and because he needed a minute to breathe. He was halfway through scanning the menu when he heard laughter. Scarlette's bright and bold, Jenny's softer, like music. Curtis looked up and forgot how to breathe. Jenny walked in wearing a simple green dress that made her eyes look like spring. Her hair was loose, curling around her shoulders, and Curtis had the insane thought that if beauty were a crime, she'd be serving life without parole. Scarlette slid into the booth across from him, grinning. Look at you, Mr. Handsome. Curtis smirked. You're just saying that because you picked the shirt. Scarlette winked. And because Jenny's here. Curtis shot her a look, but Scarlette was already waving down the waiter. Jenny slid in beside Scarlette, her smile warm as she met Curtis's eyes. Hi, she said softly. Curtis swallowed hard. Hey. Dinner was easy, too easy. Scarlette carried most of the conversation, telling stories that made Curtis laugh and Jenny roll her eyes fondly. But every so often, Curtis caught Jenny looking at him, and every time, it felt like a spark in his chest. He told himself to stop noticing. He told himself to remember the rule. But when Jenny laughed at one of his dry jokes, her hand brushing his arm as she reached for her glass, Curtis knew he was in trouble. Later, after Scarlette left to take a call, Curtis suspected sabotage. He found himself alone with Jenny. The restaurant buzzed around them, but the air between them felt quiet, charged. Jenny stirred her drink, her voice soft. You seem happier lately. Curtis met her eyes. Do I? Jenny nodded. The glow-up suits you. Curtis chuckled. Still feels weird. Jenny smiled. Weird can be good. Curtis swallowed hard. Sometimes. Jenny tilted her head, studying him. You've changed. Curtis raised an eyebrow. For better or worse? Jenny's smile deepened. Better. Curtis felt something shift inside him. Something big, something dangerous. He wanted to say more. He wanted to tell her everything. But the rule loomed like a stop sign in his head. So he said nothing. Just smiled, paid the check, and walked her to her car like a gentleman. When she hugged him goodbye, her arms warm around his shoulders, Curtis thought, God help me. Back in his apartment, Curtis stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. The man looking back at him wasn't the same guy who made that rule 7 years ago. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't naive. He was careful. He was cautious. And he was falling for Jenny Thompson. Curtis gripped the edge of the sink, his jaw tight. What's worse, he muttered. Breaking the rule? Or breaking my own heart? He didn't have an answer. Chapter 8. The turning point. Jenny Thompson had never been good at keeping secrets, at least not from Scarlette. They'd been best friends since high school, bonded over bad cafeteria food and worse boyfriends. They'd shared everything. Crushes, heartbreaks, dreams, fears. But this was different. This was Scarlett's brother. Jenny sat on Scarlett's couch, nursing a mug of tea like it was a lifeline. Scarlette was sprawled in an armchair, scrolling through her phone, oblivious to the storm brewing in Jenny's chest. Scar, Jenny began, her voice tight. Scarlette glanced up. What's wrong? You look like you swallowed a lemon. Jenny set the mug down, her hands trembling slightly. I need to tell you something. Scarlette raised an eyebrow. You're not pregnant, are you? Jenny blinked. What? No. Scarlette grinned. Then it can't be that bad. Jenny took a deep breath. It's about Curtis. Scarlett's expression shifted, curious, cautious. Okay. Jenny's heart pounded. I know I like him. The silence that followed was deafening. Jenny braced herself for shock, for anger, for the kind of awkwardness that could shatter a friendship. Scarlette blinked once, twice, then she burst out laughing. Jenny stared. Scarlette? Oh my God. Scarlette wheezed, clutching her stomach. I knew it. I knew it the moment you started sending me heart emojis after his haircut. Jenny flushed. I did not. You did, Scarlette said, grinning like a cat with cream. Jenny Thompson crushing on my baby brother. This is gold. Jenny groaned, burying her face in her hands. I didn't want to tell you because, I don't know. I didn't want to ruin anything. Scarlette sobered, her smile softening. Ruin what? Our friendship, Jenny whispered. You're my best friend. I didn't want things to get weird. Scarlette leaned forward, her voice gentle now. Jenny, you're my best friend. And Curtis? He's the best guy I know. If you like him, that's not weird. That's perfect. Jenny blinked, tears stinging her eyes. You really mean that? Scarlette grinned. Of course I do. Honestly, I was hoping you'd fall for him. Saves me from setting him up with strangers who think family-oriented means owns a yacht. Jenny laughed through the lump in her throat. I didn't plan this. Scarlette shrugged. The best things aren't planned. Jenny hesitated. What if he doesn't feel the same? Scarlette smirked. Jenny, he looks at you like you hung the moon. Jenny's breath caught. You think so? I know so, Scarlette said firmly. He's been smiling more since you started helping. And don't think I didn't notice him wearing that navy shirt every time you're around. Jenny laughed, her cheeks burning. Scarlette. Scarlette reached over and squeezed her hand. You're my best friend. I want the best for you. And my brother? He's the best. It's simple. Jenny swallowed hard, her heart pounding. So, what do I do? Scarlette grinned like a woman with a plan. Leave that to me. Later that night, Jenny lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Scarlett's words echoing in her head. He looks at you like you hung the moon. She wanted to believe it. God, she wanted to believe it. But Curtis had rules. Jenny knew that much. He was careful, cautious, the kind of man who thought before he leaped. And she was about to leap without a parachute. Jenny closed her eyes, her chest tight. She didn't know what Scarlette had in mind, but for the first time in weeks, hope flickered like a candle in the dark. Meanwhile, across town, Curtis sat on his couch, staring at his phone like it held the answers to every question he'd been afraid to ask. He'd just finished another date. A disaster as usual. The woman spent half the night talking about her ex and the other half asking if Curtis believed in manifesting wealth. He'd smiled, paid the check, and left feeling more exhausted than ever. Now, his phone buzzed with a message from Scarlette. Scarlette, dinner next week. You, me, Jenny. Don't argue. Curtis stared at the screen, his pulse tripping over itself. Jenny, again. He typed back slowly. Curtis, fine. But no setups. Scarlett's reply was instant. Scarlette, would I do that? Curtis groaned. Yes, he muttered to the empty room. He tossed the phone aside and leaned back, closing his eyes. He thought about Jenny, her laugh, her kindness, the way she made him feel like maybe he wasn't broken after all. He thought about the rule looming like a stop sign in his head. And for the first time, he wondered if some rules were meant to be broken. Chapter 9. The setup. Scarlette was many things. Bossy, blunt, occasionally terrifying, but subtle was not one of them. Curtis realized this the moment he walked into the restaurant and saw her waving like a lighthouse beacon, grinning like she'd just won the lottery. Over here, she called, loud enough to make half the diners turn. Curtis muttered under his breath, God help me, and made his way to the table. Scarlette was already seated, looking smug, and across from her was Jenny, beautiful, composed, and smiling in a way that made Curtis's stomach do that annoying flip again. He told himself not to notice. He'd been telling himself that for weeks. It wasn't working. Scarlette gestured grandly. Look at this. The gang's all here. Curtis slid into the seat beside Jenny, trying to ignore the warmth of her presence. What's the occasion? He asked, eyeing Scarlette suspiciously. Just a casual night out. Scarlette said innocently, which immediately set off alarm bells. Scarlette didn't do casual. Scarlette did schemes. Curtis glanced at Jenny, who gave a small shrug, her smile tinged with amusement. I was told there'd be food, she said softly. Curtis chuckled. Scarlette's bait is always food. Scarlette ignored them, waving down the waiter like she owned the place. We'll start with drinks. Curtis, you're getting something strong. Curtis raised an eyebrow. Planning to get me drunk? Scarlette grinned. Planning to get you relaxed. Curtis groaned. This feels like a setup. Scarlette's eyes sparkled. What? No. Just friends having dinner. Jenny bit her lip, clearly fighting a smile. Curtis caught the look and felt his pulse trip over itself. He turned away, pretending to study the menu, but the truth was he couldn't focus. Not with Jenny sitting this close, her perfume subtle and warm, her laugh like sunlight breaking through clouds. He had rules. Rules kept things simple. Rules kept things safe. Scarlette ordered enough appetizers to feed a small army, then launched into a monologue about her coworker's disastrous blind date. Curtis listened with half an ear, his attention snagging on Jenny every time she laughed or brushed her hair back. He hated how aware he was of her, how much he wanted to lean in, to hear her laugh up close, to ask her questions that had nothing to do with dating apps or makeover plans. He told himself to stop. He didn't. The first mishap happened when the drinks arrived. Scarlette reached for her margarita, knocked over the water glass, and sent a tidal wave across the table. Curtis jumped back, but not fast enough. Cold water soaked his sleeve. Scarlette, he hissed, grabbing napkins. Scarlette winced. Oops, my bad. Jenny was already moving, dabbing at his arm with a napkin, her touch light and careful. Hold still, she murmured. Curtis froze, every nerve ending on high alert. Jenny's fingers brushed his skin, and suddenly the restaurant felt too warm, too bright, too everything. Scarlette smirked. Well, that's one way to break the ice. Curtis shot her a look that promised retribution. Jenny laughed softly, and Curtis thought, God help me. The second mishap came with the appetizers. Scarlette insisted on ordering calamari, which Curtis hated, and Jenny loved. Curtis tried to hide his grimace as Jenny popped a piece into her mouth, eyes lighting up. You don't like calamari? She asked, catching his expression. Curtis shrugged. Not a fan. Jenny smiled. More for me. Curtis chuckled. Guess that works out. Scarlette leaned in, eyes gleaming. See? Compatibility test. Passed. Curtis groaned. Scarlette? Relax, she said, waving him off. I'm just saying, you two balance each other out. Jenny flushed, and Curtis felt heat creep up his neck. He reached for his drink, praying for a distraction. By the time the entrees arrived, Curtis was convinced Scarlette had orchestrated every detail. The cozy booth, the dim lighting, the playlist of soft acoustic covers. It was like a rom-com set, and Curtis hated how much he liked it. Conversation flowed easily, mostly because Jenny had a way of making everything feel effortless. She asked about his job, his favorite books, his family traditions. Curtis found himself laughing, telling stories he hadn't shared in years. When Jenny laughed, really laughed, her head tipping back, Curtis felt something crack open inside him. A space he thought had closed for good. He told himself to stop. He didn't. The third mishap, because of course there was a third, happened when Scarlette decided they needed dessert. She ordered a towering chocolate cake for the table, which promptly collapsed when the waiter set it down too hard. Frosting smeared across the plate, and Scarlette declared it a metaphor for Curtis's love life. Curtis groaned. Jenny laughed so hard she nearly cried. Curtis couldn't help laughing too, even as he muttered, I'm never forgiving you for this. Scarlette grinned. You'll thank me later. Curtis doubted that. But when Jenny's hand brushed his under the table, light and accidental, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, Scarlette was right. Later, outside the restaurant, Scarlette hugged them both and announced she had urgent errands, leaving Curtis and Jenny standing on the sidewalk under a string of twinkling lights. Curtis shoved his hands in his pockets, suddenly awkward. Sorry about all that, he said, gesturing vaguely toward the chaos behind them. Jenny smiled, her eyes warm. Don't be. It was fun. Curtis chuckled. Fun is one word for it. Jenny tilted her head. You don't like setups? Curtis hesitated. Not usually. Jenny's smile softened. Maybe this one wasn't so bad. Curtis stared at her, his heart thudding like a drum. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words tangled in his throat. He told himself to look away, to keep it safe, but he didn't. Jenny's gaze held his, steady and unflinching. For a moment, the world narrowed to just them. The glow of the lights, the hum of traffic, the quiet pull of something Curtis had been trying to ignore. He swallowed hard. Jenny. Her phone buzzed, breaking the spell. She glanced down, then back up, her smile apologetic. I should go. Curtis nodded, forcing his voice steady. Yeah, of course. Jenny hesitated, then touched his arm lightly. Good night, Curtis. Curtis watched her walk away, his chest tight, his mind a mess of rules and feelings he didn't want to name. When she disappeared around the corner, He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Scarlett's voice echoed in his head. You'll thank me later. Curtis wasn't sure if he wanted to thank her or strangle her. Maybe both. Chapter 10. The confession. Curtis had spent the entire day trying not to think about Jenny. He failed spectacularly. Every time he opened his email at work, he saw her smile. Every time he grabbed coffee, he heard her laugh. By the time he drove home, his chest felt like a pressure cooker, and he knew he couldn't keep this bottled up anymore. Rules be damned. It was late when he texted her. Curtis, are you awake? He stared at the screen, heart pounding like he'd just run a marathon. Seconds stretched into eternities before her reply popped up. Jenny, yeah, everything okay? Curtis hesitated, then typed, Curtis, can you come by? I need to talk. There was a pause, then Jenny, on my way. Curtis exhaled, his pulse racing. He paced the living room like a man waiting for a verdict, every nerve buzzing. He didn't know what he was going to say, only that he had to say something before he exploded. When the knock came, Curtis nearly tripped over his own feet. He opened the door to find Jenny standing there in jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked casual, beautiful, and completely unaware of the storm raging inside him. Hey, she said softly, stepping inside. You sounded serious. Curtis shut the door, his throat dry. Yeah, thanks for coming. Jenny smiled faintly. You're welcome. What's going on? Curtis rubbed the back of his neck, searching for words. I've been trying to ignore this for weeks. Jenny tilted her head, her eyes curious. Ignore what? Curtis swallowed hard. How I feel. Jenny blinked. Curtis. He met her gaze and the dam broke. I like you, Jenny. More than I should. More than I planned. And I've been fighting it because you're Scarlett's best friend, and I have the stupid rule about never crossing that line. But every time I see you, every time you laugh, every time you look at me like I'm not broken, I can't stop wanting more. The words hung in the air, heavy and raw. Curtis felt like he'd ripped open his chest and handed her his heart, beating and bloody. Jenny stared at him, her lips parted, her breath catching. For a moment, Curtis thought he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. Then Jenny spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. You think you're the only one who's been fighting this? Curtis froze. What? Jenny stepped closer, her eyes shining. Curtis, I've liked you for months. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to hurt Scarlett or make things awkward. But every time we're together, it's harder to pretend I don't feel it. Curtis's heart slammed against his ribs. You, like me. Jenny smiled, soft and trembling. I do. Curtis let out a shaky laugh, half relief, half disbelief. God, I thought I was losing my mind. Jenny laughed too, the sound breaking the tension like sunlight through clouds. You're not. Curtis reached for her hand before he could stop himself, his fingers brushing hers. Jenny, I don't want to mess this up. You won't, she said gently. Not if we're honest. Curtis nodded, his throat tight. I'm scared. Jenny squeezed his hand. Me too. For a moment, they just stood there, hands entwined, hearts pounding. Then Curtis pulled her into his arms, and Jenny came willingly, her head resting against his chest like it belonged there. Curtis closed his eyes, breathing her in, feeling something he hadn't felt in years, peace. Not the fragile kind that shatters under pressure, but the solid kind that feels like home. They sat on the couch, talking for hours, about fears, hopes, what went wrong before, what they wanted now. Curtis told her about the sunset porch dream, and Jenny smiled, saying, maybe that picture isn't gone. Maybe it just looks different now. Curtis thought about that long after she left, her kiss still warm on his lips, her laughter echoing in his head. For the first time in a long time, Curtis believed she might be right. Chapter 11. The fallout. Curtis had faced tough conversations before, telling his boss he needed time off, explaining to his parents why his marriage ended, but nothing compared to the dread curling in his stomach now. Scarlett was going to kill him. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at his phone like it might bite. Jenny had left hours ago, her kiss still lingering on his lips, her laughter echoing in his head. He should have been floating. Instead, he felt like a man waiting for a storm, because Scarlett wasn't just his sister. She was Jenny's best friend, and Curtis had broken the one rule he'd sworn never to break. The storm arrived in the form of a text. Scarlett, family dinner tomorrow. Don't be late. Curtis stared at the screen, his pulse spiking. Family dinner, which meant Scarlett, which meant Jenny, which meant everything was about to come out. He typed back, Curtis, I'll be there. Then he tossed the phone aside and muttered, God help me. The next evening, Curtis walked into his parents' house like a man approaching a firing squad. The smell of roast beef and garlic bread filled the air, warm and familiar, but it did nothing to calm his nerves. Scarlett was already there, perched on the couch with a glass of wine, looking smug. Jenny sat beside her, casual and composed, her smile soft when she saw him. Curtis felt his chest tighten. Hey, Jenny said quietly. Hey, Curtis replied, his voice rough. Scarlett narrowed her eyes. You two seem friendly. Curtis swallowed hard. Scarlett, don't, she said, holding up a hand. Not yet. Sit. Eat. Then we talk. Curtis obeyed, mostly because his mother appeared with a plate and the kind of look that brooked no argument. Dinner was a blur. His father chatting about football, his mother fussing over the gravy, Scarlette shooting him loaded glances every time Jenny laughed at something he said. By the time dessert rolled around, Curtis felt like he was sitting on a live wire. Scarlette set down her fork and leaned back, eyes gleaming. "So," she said sweetly, "anything you two want to share?" Curtis froze. Jenny glanced at him, her expression calm but her fingers tightening around her napkin. Curtis cleared his throat. "Scarlette." Scarlette arched a brow. "Curtis." He exhaled slowly. "Jenny and we're seeing each other." The silence that followed was deafening. His mother blinked. His father paused mid-bite. Scarlette stared like he'd just announced he was moving to Mars. Then she laughed. Loud, bright, and unexpected. Curtis frowned. "You're laughing?" Scarlette wiped her eyes, still chuckling. "Oh my God, Curtis. I thought you were going to tell me you joined a cult." Curtis blinked. "You're not mad." Scarlette grinned. "Mad? Are you kidding? I've been trying to set you up for months. I just didn't think you'd pick Jenny." Jenny flushed. "Scarlette." Scarlette waved a hand. "Relax. You're my best friend. He's my brother. Honestly, it's perfect." Curtis stared at her, stunned. "You're okay with this?" Scarlette smirked. "More than okay. I approve." Curtis let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Jenny laughed softly, and Curtis reached for her hand under the table, their fingers intertwining like it was the most natural thing in the world. His mother smiled, her eyes warm. "Well," she said, "I always hoped Curtis would find someone who makes him happy." Jenny squeezed his hand. "I hope so too." Curtis looked at her, his chest full, his heart steady for the first time in years. For a moment the world felt right. Scarlette raised her glass. "To new beginnings." Curtis clinked his glass against hers, then Jenny's, and thought, maybe this is what hope feels like. Later, as they walked to the car, Jenny slipped her arm through his. "That went better than expected." Curtis chuckled. "I thought Scarlette was going to throw a fork at me." Jenny smiled. "She loves you." Curtis glanced at her, his voice soft. "So do I." Jenny stopped, her breath catching. "Curtis." He cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing her cheek. "I love you, Jenny. I know it's fast, but I do." Jenny's eyes shone, her smile trembling. "I love you too." Curtis kissed her under the porch light, slow and certain, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like that sunset porch dream wasn't gone. It was just waiting for them to build it together. Chapter 12. The glow-up finale. 6 months later, Curtis Brown stood in front of the mirror in his apartment, adjusting the cuff of his shirt. It wasn't the same man who had slouched in this very spot half a year ago, wondering if he'd ever feel like himself again. His hair was neat, his clothes fit like they were made for him, and his smile, his real smile, was back. Scarlette had called it a glow-up. Curtis called it something else, a second chance. He heard laughter from the living room and turned to see Jenny arranging flowers in a vase, her ponytail swinging as she moved. She looked up, caught his gaze, and smiled, the kind of smile that made Curtis's chest feel too small for his heart. "You're staring," she teased. Curtis grinned. "Can you blame me?" Jenny laughed, shaking her head. "You clean up well, Mr. Brown." Curtis crossed the room, slipping his arms around her waist. "You're the reason I cleaned up at all." Jenny tilted her head, her eyes warm. "Scarlette might argue with that." Curtis chuckled. "Scarlette started it. You finished it." Jenny's smile softened. "You didn't need finishing, Curtis. You just needed reminding." Curtis kissed her then, slow, certain, like a man who finally knew what he wanted and wasn't afraid to claim it. When they broke apart, Jenny rested her forehead against his chest, her voice quiet. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" she asked. Curtis brushed a strand of hair from her face. "All the time. But then I think about now, and I wouldn't change a thing." Jenny's eyes shimmered, and Curtis felt that old ache, the one that used to whisper, "Don't trust yourself," fade into nothing. He trusted himself now. He trusted her. He trusted them. Scarlette burst through the door like a hurricane, carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing a grin that could power a city. "My favorite couple," she declared, setting the bottle on the counter. "Tonight we celebrate." Curtis groaned. "Scarlette?" "Nope," she said, cutting him off. "You're officially off the market, and I demand festivities." Jenny laughed, hugging Scarlette. "You're relentless." Scarlette winked. "You're welcome." Curtis shook his head, but he couldn't stop smiling. For once, Scarlette's meddling had led to something good, something perfect. The evening was loud and messy and full of laughter. Scarlette toasted to love, second chances, and my matchmaking genius. Curtis rolled his eyes but raised his glass anyway. Jenny squeezed his hand under the table, and Curtis thought, this is it. This is what I wanted all along. Not the porch and the sunset, not yet. But the feeling, the certainty, the promise of something real. Later, when Scarlette finally left with a wink and a warning to start planning the wedding, Curtis and Jenny curled up on the couch, the glow of the city lights spilling through the window. Do you think she's serious? Jenny asked, her voice amused. Curtis kissed her temple. Scarlette's always serious. Jenny laughed softly. Are you? Curtis looked at her then, really looked, and felt the answer settle deep in his bones. Yeah, he said quietly. I am. Jenny's breath hitched, her eyes wide. Curtis, he smiled, brushing his thumb over her cheek. Not tonight, not like this, but soon. Jenny's smile trembled, then bloomed like sunlight. Soon, she whispered. Curtis pulled her close, and for the first time in years, he felt like that old postcard in his mind. The porch, the sunset, wasn't just a dream. It was a plan. Epilogue. The sunset that finally happened. 2 years later, Curtis stood on a porch overlooking a lake, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. Jenny sat beside him in a rocking chair, her hand resting on her rounded belly, a soft smile on her lips. Scarlette was inside, fussing over baby clothes and declaring herself the world's best aunt. Curtis could hear her laughter through the open window, and it made him smile. He reached for Jenny's hand, threading his fingers through hers. Remember when I said I wanted someone who wanted me? He murmured. Jenny squeezed his hand. I remember. Curtis looked at her, his chest full to bursting. You're that someone. Jenny's eyes shimmered, and Curtis thought, this is it. This is everything. The sunset stretched across the horizon, and Curtis realized something. Life didn't always go the way you planned. Sometimes it went better.